The first sign that something was wrong wasn't my wife coming home late. It wasn't the perfume, the forced smile, or the way she kissed my cheek like she was checking a box. It was her friend Tessa looking at me 2 days later like she was carrying something sharp in her throat and didn't know whether to swallow it or spit it out. My name is Ryan. I'm 36, I live outside Columbus, and until last fall I thought I understood the shape of my marriage. Not perfectly. Not in some fairy tale way. But enough to believe I knew when something serious was off. My wife, Lauren, and I had been together for 11 years, married for 8. No kids. Just a 2-story house in a quiet subdivision, a black lab named Moose, and the kind of routine people envy when they don't have to live inside it. I work in logistics for a regional food distributor. Early mornings, warehouse calls, shipment delays, route problems, 1,000 little fires every day. Lauren worked in event planning for a boutique hospitality group downtown. She had more glamour in one Thursday than I had in an entire quarter. Venues, launch parties, charity dinners, brand people, carefully curated nonsense. I used to tease her that she got paid to make rich strangers feel interesting. She used to laugh when I said it. That was before she started bringing that world home and treating me like I was the least polished thing in it. Still, if you had asked me a month before everything broke, I wouldn't have said I thought she was cheating. Distant sometimes, yes. More irritable than she used to be, definitely. Harder to reach, absolutely. But cheating? No. I wasn't there yet. Men like me usually aren't. We explain things away because the truth feels expensive. We tell ourselves stress is stress, cold seasons pass, and marriage means staying steady even when the other person gets hard to hold on to. Lauren had gone on a 3-day birthday trip with 3 friends in early October. Not some wild Vegas thing. Just a long weekend in Charleston. Nice hotel, rooftop bars, dinner reservations, matching outfits, the kind of girls' trip that lives half in real life and half in Instagram stories. Tessa was one of the friends. So were Nicole and Bree. I knew them all well enough. Tessa especially. She and Lauren had been close since college, though close in that adult way where people drift in and out and still act like nothing changed. Before the trip, Lauren had been strangely impatient with me for about 2 straight weeks. Everything I said seemed to hit her wrong. If I asked what time she'd be home, I was hovering. If I forgot to thaw something for dinner, I was useless. If I tried to touch her in bed, she'd sigh first, like affection had become another chore she had to budget energy for. The night before she left, I helped her zip up one of those hard-shell suitcases while she stood over me checking a packing list on her phone. I remember looking up at her and feeling that weird lonely sensation you get when the person right in front of you already feels halfway gone. But she kissed me goodbye the next morning. Said she'd text me when they landed. She did. Sent a couple photos that first day too. Drinks on a rooftop. A blurred group selfie in golden light. A plate of oysters somebody had arranged like a jewelry display. Totally normal. The kind of thing a husband sees and double taps without thinking too hard. Then her replies got thinner. Not absent. Just thinner. The second day I texted around dinner asking how it was going. She responded 2 hours later saying they were bouncing between places and her phone was dying. I told her to have fun. She hearted the message and that was that. On the third night, I sent a stupid photo of Moose sprawled across her side of the bed. Usually she loves stuff like that. This time she only replied the next morning with a laughing emoji and a message saying she was hungover and heading to brunch. Nothing dramatic. Just less. When Lauren got home Sunday evening, she looked great. Too great, honestly, for somebody who had spent 3 days drinking with friends and barely sleeping. Her hair was redone. Makeup fresh. Tan a little deeper. She walked in dragging her suitcase behind her, kissed me on the cheek, scratched Moose behind the ears, and acted so normal it felt deliberate. She talked about the hotel, the food, the rooftop views, the one friend who almost lost a heel in the cobblestones. She moved through the kitchen unpacking leftovers and cosmetic bags like the whole weekend had been exactly what she said it was. That should have calmed me. Instead, it bothered me. Not because I had evidence. Because her normal felt rehearsed. Too smooth. Like she had decided in advance what version of the trip I was getting. I watched her that night while she folded clothes on the bed. She was lighter than she'd been in weeks. More relaxed. Even playful for a minute. But not with me exactly. More like she had brought some extra warmth home from somewhere else and was spending it around the house by accident. When I asked which restaurant was her favorite, she answered fast, then changed the subject before I could ask anything else. When I joked that Charleston apparently agreed with her, she smiled without really looking at me. Then she took her phone into the bathroom. Again. Not proof. But I noticed it. The next weird thing didn't come from Lauren. It came from Tessa. 3 days after the trip, we all ended up at Nicole and her husband's place for a casual Thursday cookout. Nothing formal. A few couples, burgers, too much wine, people pretending fall had actually started even though it was still warm enough for mosquitoes. Lauren almost cancelled at the last minute, which was unlike her because she usually liked being seen after a trip, liked retelling stories while the photos were still fresh. But then she changed her mind and went. That night, Tessa avoided me so obviously it felt almost rude. At first I thought I imagined it. She was talking to everybody, helping Nicole in the kitchen, laughing when the men burned the first batch of burgers because nobody was actually watching the grill. But every time I drifted near her, something shifted. She'd suddenly remember a drink she needed. Or turn to ask someone else a question. Or get busy with nothing. Once I caught her looking at me from across the patio with this tight, unsettled expression, and the second our eyes met, she looked away so fast my stomach dropped. I did what any decent husband trying not to embarrass himself would do. I ignored it. But then Lauren went inside to help with dessert, and Tessa ended up alone beside me near the cooler for maybe 10 seconds. I asked if she was doing okay because she seemed off. She said she was fine, but her voice came out wrong. Dry. Forced. She didn't even look at me while saying it. Then she grabbed a hard seltzer she clearly didn't want and walked back toward the house like standing there another second might burn her. That stayed with me the whole drive home. Lauren, meanwhile, acted completely normal. Better than normal, actually. She was talkative in the car. Told a long story about brief flirting with a bartender in Charleston. Mocked a couple at Nicole's house who apparently brought their own organic buns for the burgers. She sounded easy. Loose. Like someone with nothing sitting on her conscience. I almost hated Tessa for making me notice anything. The next afternoon, I was at work when my phone buzzed. It was Tessa. That alone was strange. She never texted me directly unless it was about a group gift, a party time, or Lauren forgetting a sweater somewhere. I looked down expecting something harmless. Instead I saw a message bubble that only had my name and a comma. Then it disappeared. A minute later another one came through. It said she had meant to text Lauren. That was it. No follow-up. No context. I stared at the screen long enough for the warehouse noise around me to start sounding far away. My first instinct was to tell myself not to be ridiculous. People mistype. People send awkward half messages all the time. But something about that comma, that aborted start, got under my skin. It felt like the beginning of a confession that lost its nerve. That evening I said nothing to Lauren. I just watched. Watched how quickly she smiled at certain notifications. Watched how she angled her screen away when she sat beside me on the couch. Watched how her mood dipped whenever I mentioned future plans, but lifted when she drifted off into her phone for a few minutes. Then, around 10:30, while she was in the shower, my own phone lit up again. Tessa. This time the message was longer. Long enough that the preview cut off halfway. Long enough that my pulse started pounding before I even opened it. And when I did, all I saw at first was the first line. She said she needed to tell me something about that trip, and she was sorry it had taken her this long. I read Tessa's message 3 times before the words really settled into me. She said she had gone back and forth about whether to say anything. She said she did not want to blow up a marriage over one bad night if she was reading things wrong. But she also said she had been sick about it ever since Charleston, and after seeing me at Nicole's house, she could not keep acting normal. Then she asked if I was alone. I looked toward the bathroom. Water still running. Lauren was humming faintly to herself in the shower, moving through the house like there was nothing in the air but steam and routine. That sound did something ugly to me. Not because it proved anything. Because it made Tessa's message feel even more out of place. 2 realities pressing against each other in the same minute. I told Tessa I was alone. She did not answer right away. Those few minutes felt longer than most arguments I have ever had. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hand, listening to the shower, listening to Moose move around in the hallway, listening to my own breathing get shallow and fast. I kept telling myself not to decide anything yet. Not to build a whole betrayal out of one nervous text from a woman who might just be overreacting to something drunk and stupid. Then Tessa sent another message. She said that on the second night in Charleston, after dinner and too many drinks, Lauren had disappeared with a man from the rooftop bar. Not for 5 minutes. Not for a harmless conversation. Long enough that Nicole and Bree started covering for her when people asked where she went. Tessa said nobody said it plainly at first, but everybody knew the energy had changed. The kind of silence women fall into when something crosses a line and they are all deciding whether to admit they saw it. My chest went cold when I read that. I asked what she meant by disappeared. Again, a pause. Then Tessa said she had seen Lauren leave the rooftop with him through the side exit near the elevator. She said she told herself maybe they were just talking somewhere quieter because the music was loud and Lauren was drunk and reckless and wanting attention. But then Lauren did not come back for more than an hour. When she finally returned, her lipstick was smudged, her hair was slightly off, and she was acting too bright. Too loose. Too pleased with herself. I stared at that message until the words started to blur. The shower turned off. I locked my phone so fast it almost slipped out of my hand. A second later Lauren came back into the bedroom in one of my old college t-shirts, towel around her wet hair, face fresh and relaxed. She asked what I was doing sitting there in the dark. I said I was tired. She nodded, climbed into bed, and started scrolling through her phone like the room was perfectly ordinary. I lay down beside her and stared at the ceiling with Tessa's words moving through me like poison. Disappeared. An hour. Smudged lipstick. Acting too bright. I did not sleep much that night. Every time I drifted, my mind snapped back awake and replayed the timeline of the trip. The thinner replies. The delayed texts. The hungover brunch message. The strange smoothness when she got home. Tessa avoiding my eyes at the cookout like she had already watched me standing too close to the edge of something I did not know was there. By morning, I had moved from disbelief into something worse. Pattern recognition. The human mind is cruel that way. Once one ugly possibility gets in, it starts organizing old moments around itself. Lauren's recent impatience. The distance in bed. The way she came home from Charleston lighter but somehow less reachable. The warmth she brought back with her that never really landed on me. It all started aligning too neatly. Still, I did not confront her. Not because I was scared of the truth. Because I did not yet know what truth I had. Tessa had seen something. Maybe enough to confirm betrayal. Maybe enough to shatter my life if I chose to believe it too quickly. But I needed more than a shape in the dark. I needed to know whether my wife had made one reckless choice on a trip or whether I was only now seeing the beginning of something deeper. So I watched. That weekend, Lauren became even more suspicious once I stopped trying to be close. She had gotten used to me reaching toward her emotionally, even if all she did was reject me. Me pulling back seemed to confuse her. I stopped asking what she was laughing at when she smiled at her phone. Stopped offering to make plans. Stopped filling silence with little husband gestures meant to keep us connected. And almost immediately, I noticed how much she had relied on me being the one who exposed the cracks first. Saturday morning, she sat at the kitchen island in leggings and one of those expensive fitted tops she wore when she wanted to look effortless. She was texting someone while drinking coffee, smiling down at the screen in these quick private flashes. Not a huge grin. Just enough softness to remind me what her face used to look like when she looked at me years ago. Moose was lying at her feet, and the whole scene would have looked normal to anybody else. Then I walked in. The smile vanished. The phone turned over. She asked if I wanted breakfast in that clipped, neutral voice people use after they have to switch masks too fast. I said no and took Moose outside. Out in the backyard, I stood there with the leash hanging from one hand and realized I was starting to dread walking back into my own house. Not because of some dramatic confrontation. Because I could feel the split widening between what she was showing me and what might actually be true. Later that afternoon, Tessa texted again. She said she had not told me everything the night before because she was afraid once she started, she would have to go all the way. Then she said there was something else she saw in Charleston that had been eating at her. She said when Lauren came back to the room that night, Nicole and Bree were drunk enough to joke about it, but not drunk enough to miss what it meant. Lauren had brushed them off, laughed it away, and said it was nothing. But while the others were getting ready for bed, Tessa saw Lauren on her phone in the bathroom doorway, smiling down at a message from an unsaved number. Tessa only caught a piece of it, but it was enough to understand the tone. It was the kind of message you do not send a married woman after harmless small talk at a bar. The kind that assumes access has already been granted. I asked Tessa whether Lauren had said who he was. She said no. She also said something that landed even harder. She said Lauren had been glowing, not ashamed. That was her word. Glowing. Like the attention had woken something up in her and she liked what it brought to the surface. That line stayed with me all day. Because it fit too well with what I had been seeing at home. The thing about betrayal is that once you suspect it, normal behavior becomes loaded. A woman coming home in a good mood is no longer just a woman in a good mood. A delayed text is not a delayed text. A phone turned face down is not a phone turned face down. Everything starts vibrating with possible meaning, and you do not know whether you are becoming more perceptive or just more broken. Sunday evening, Lauren mentioned that Bree wanted to do a girls' dinner later in the week to relive the trip and share photos. She said it casually while unloading the dishwasher, but I noticed she did not look at me when she said it. I asked who all was going. She named the same 4 women who had gone to Charleston. Then, half a beat later, she added that maybe some other people would stop by too. Some other people. I do not know why that phrase bothered me as much as it did, but it did. Because it felt loose in a way her explanations usually were not. And because by then Tessa's words had made me sensitive to every little place where Lauren's story seemed built to flex if needed. That night, while Lauren was upstairs getting ready for bed, my phone buzzed again. Tessa. This time there was no hesitation in the message. She said she was sorry, but she needed me to know that on the last morning in Charleston, she had seen Lauren delete the message thread before brunch. And once I read that, I knew I was no longer dealing with one blurry bad moment from a trip. I was dealing with someone who came home planning to bury it. After Tessa told me Lauren deleted the message thread, something in me went still. Not calm. Not numb. Still. Because until that point, some part of me had still been bargaining with reality. Maybe it had been one reckless night. Maybe Lauren had crossed a line, panicked, and come home trying to bury the whole thing before it spread any further. That would have still destroyed me, but at least it would have had the shape of a single bad decision. Deleting the thread changed that shape. Deleting means protecting. Deleting means thought. Deleting means whatever happened in Charleston had survived long enough into the daylight for my wife to decide it needed to be hidden before she came home to me. From that moment on, I stopped looking at the trip as the event. I started looking at it as the leak. The thing that let me glimpse a bigger problem already moving underneath us. Monday morning, Lauren acted like any other Monday existed. She got dressed for work in one of her tailored black outfits, packed a makeup bag into her tote, kissed Moose on the head, and asked whether I could call the HVAC company about the weird sound upstairs if I got a chance. Her tone was normal. Easy. Not loving, but familiar enough that a week earlier I might have let it wash over me and accepted the comfort of routine. Now it sounded like theater. I told her I'd handle it. She thanked me and left. The second the garage door shut, I stood in the kitchen listening to the house settle around me. Refrigerator hum. Dog nails on the hardwood. Clock over the stove. Ordinary sounds. That was the part that kept messing with me. Betrayal doesn't arrive in some dramatic soundtrack. It moves into normal mornings and uses your own life as cover. I didn't tear through the house like a man in a movie. I moved carefully. Lauren had become too polished lately for sloppy mistakes, but people always leave traces somewhere. Not because they're dumb. Because they're human, and secret lives create pressure. Pressure leaks. I started with the obvious place. Her travel bag was still in the guest room closet, half unpacked, shoved behind a stack of extra blankets like she had meant to finish dealing with it and never did. Inside were the usual things. Toiletries. Sand stuck in the seams of a cosmetic case. A rolled-up hotel robe belt she must have accidentally brought home. Receipts for brunch and room service. Harmless stuff. Then I found the bar wristband. Thin black band, cut but not thrown away, caught in the side pocket. One of those rooftop event access bands you get at places trying to feel exclusive. Not suspicious by itself. She'd posted rooftop photos the first night. But attached to it was a folded drink receipt. 2 old fashions. 1 espresso martini. Timestamp, 12:14 a.m. That bothered me immediately. Not because of the drinks. Because Lauren hated old fashions. Always said they tasted like a woodshop soaked in syrup. I knew that because we'd joked about it more than once. She ordered crisp cocktails, wine, occasionally a margarita if the place looked clean enough. Never old fashions. I stared at that receipt for a long time. 3 drinks. 1 of them hers. 2 of them almost certainly not. I slipped it back exactly where I found it. That afternoon, I texted Tessa one question. I asked whether Nicole and Bree knew more than they were saying. She took 15 minutes to answer, and every minute of that felt like standing on a train track listening for something far away. Then she wrote back that Bree probably knew less because she had been the drunkest one that night, but Nicole knew enough to start covering in real time. Tessa said she couldn't prove Nicole understood the full extent of what happened, but the second Lauren disappeared, Nicole started answering questions before anybody even asked them directly. Like she was already managing optics. Managing optics. That sounded exactly like Lauren's world. Clean surfaces. Controlled version. Damage containment before truth even had time to breathe. I asked whether Tessa knew the man's name. She said no, But she remembered one thing: he wasn't random to Lauren by the end of the night. I asked what that meant. Tessa said that before Lauren left the rooftop with him, she had introduced him to the group in a way that felt too easy for someone she had just met. Not like an old friend. Just immediate. Comfortable. He knew where they were staying because he joked about the hotel rooftop being overrated compared to theirs. That meant they had already talked longer than Lauren later pretended. That detail lodged in me hard, because it turned the whole night from a possible drunken blur into something slower, warmer, chosen. By Tuesday, I couldn't focus at work at all. I'd be halfway through a route issue or inventory call and suddenly picture Lauren in Charleston, leaning towards some man at a rooftop bar, smiling with that open face she'd stopped giving me months ago. Then I'd see her in our kitchen Sunday evening unpacking sunscreen and tiny hotel soaps, acting like the whole trip fit neatly into the version she'd prepared for me. It made every task feel stupid. Every email. Every number. Like the practical world had become wallpaper over a house fire. So I did something I hadn't done before. I drove downtown after work and parked outside Lauren's office. Not right in front. Across the street near a meter, half blocked by a delivery van. I felt ridiculous the second I killed the engine. Too old for this. Too grounded for it. I was a 36-year-old man in a logistics polo sitting in traffic haze, waiting to see whether my own wife looked different when she thought her life was still compartmentalized. Employees started filing out around 5:30. Small groups at first. Then singles. A pair of young assistants laughing over something on a phone. A man carrying floral mock-ups. Two women in heels talking too fast. Lauren came out at 5:42. She wasn't alone. Nicole was with her. That made my pulse spike for reasons I couldn't fully explain. Not because two friends leaving work together was strange. Because Nicole had been in Charleston. Nicole had covered for her. And watching them side by side felt like seeing part of the lie move in daylight. They stood near the curb for a minute talking. Then Lauren checked her phone and looked down the block. Not casually. Expectantly. Nicole noticed the look, said something, and Lauren gave this quick half smile I recognized instantly. The same one she used when she wanted to appear relaxed but was already elsewhere mentally. A black SUV pulled up. Not an Uber. Too clean. Too deliberate. Nicole stepped back. Lauren leaned in toward the passenger window, said something through a smile, then opened the door and got in. Nicole didn't look surprised. That was the part that hit me hardest. Not just that Lauren got into another vehicle with somebody waiting for her like this was a pattern. Nicole's face told me this had happened before. She stood there on the sidewalk like she was watching a familiar scene and had already made peace with being part of it. I waited 3 seconds, then pulled out. The SUV stayed ahead of me through downtown traffic, then turned toward the short north. Restaurant district. Bars. Boutique hotels. Places where people go when they want a night to feel expensive and slightly hidden. I kept enough distance not to be obvious, but close enough not to lose them. They parked outside a low-lit cocktail place with a side patio and dark windows. I parked half a block down. Lauren got out first. Then the driver stepped out. He was around 40, maybe a little older, blazer without a tie, the kind of guy who looked polished without trying too hard. Not movie star handsome. Just practiced. Social. The kind of man women describe as interesting because he knows how to make eye contact feel like a private invitation. Lauren smiled at him in a way that made me grip the wheel. Not big. Not flashy. Intimate. He said something, and she touched his forearm lightly before they went inside. That touch shattered whatever weak excuses I still had left. Because it was unconscious. Familiar. Not the body language of a woman trying to keep her distance after one regrettable moment on a trip. It was the body language of someone already living inside a hidden current. I sat there for almost an hour. Didn't go in. Didn't leave. Just watched the door and felt my marriage rearranging itself around facts I never asked for. At one point Nicole walked in too, about 20 minutes after them, which told me everything was even uglier than I'd hoped. This wasn't just some one-off secret Lauren was protecting alone. There was a system around it now. Friends who knew. Friends who buffered. Friends who helped normal life keep moving around the rot. A little after 7, my phone buzzed. Lauren. She texted asking whether I had already eaten because work had turned into one of those nights and she might be late. I looked up at the bar entrance while reading that. Then back down at the screen. That moment did more damage than seeing her with him. Because it was active. Present tense. A lie delivered while she was inside it. I didn't answer right away. 3 minutes later she sent a second text with a tired face emoji and said she felt bad but probably wouldn't make it home until after 9. I finally replied and said no worries. No worries. Then I put the phone down and sat there in the fading light feeling like I had just watched something inside myself go from wounded to dangerous. Not violent. Not reckless. Clear. Because now I wasn't investigating whether something had happened. I was investigating how long I had been living with a woman who could look me in the eye over breakfast, kiss my dog on the head, text me little domestic excuses at dinner time, and build an entirely separate emotional reality right under the roof I paid for. And for the first time since Dessa sent that first half-typed message, I wasn't afraid of what the truth would be. I was afraid of how calm I was starting to feel while finding it. I stayed in that car until the bar lights came on fully and the sky went dark enough to reflect my own face back at me in the windshield. Lauren didn't come out alone. That was the detail that finally took this out of the realm of suspicion and dropped it somewhere hard and final. A little after 9, she stepped out of the bar with him, close enough that nobody looking at them would have called it casual. Not hanging off each other. Not drunk. Worse than that. Comfortable. He held the door, and she touched his chest lightly as she laughed at something he said. Then they stood near the curb for a few seconds like neither of them was in a hurry for the night to end. That kind of ease doesn't belong to strangers. It doesn't belong to one reckless mistake either. I watched from half a block away with both hands locked on the steering wheel, feeling everything inside me pull tight and strangely calm at the same time. I had spent days piecing together fragments. Tessa's unease. The delayed replies from Charleston. The deleted thread. Nicole covering. The late work text sent from inside a lie. But standing there in the dark, looking at my wife smile up at another man like she had all the space in the world for him, I finally understood the truth in the simplest way possible. This had not followed the trip. The trip had exposed it. He said something else, and Lauren glanced down the street before leaning in and kissing him. Not a hesitant kiss. Not a confused, drunk, what am I doing kiss. A practiced one. Quick, but natural. Like it belonged inside an evening that had already happened more than once. My whole body went cold. I wish I could tell you I stormed over there. That I dragged the whole secret into the street under the bar lights and made them look at what they'd done. But that isn't what happened. Real betrayal doesn't always make you loud. Sometimes it makes you very, very still. I let them separate. I watched him open the passenger door for her again. I watched her get in. Then I followed. Not close. Just enough. They didn't head toward our house. They went south, toward one of the nicer boutique hotels near downtown. The SUV pulled into the valet lane. Lauren got out, smoothed her hair, thanked the valet with that same polished smile she used on clients and strangers and apparently meant she was cheating with. Then she and the man walked inside side by side like they had every right in the world to be there. I didn't need more than that. I drove home. The house was dark except for the lamp by the couch I'd left on for Moose. He got up when I came in, tail thumping once against the rug, and I remember kneeling down to rub behind his ears because I needed to touch something honest. Lauren got home just before midnight. I was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in. No TV on. No half-finished dinner. No routine left to hide behind. Just me, one overhead light, and the silence she had been filling with lies for longer than I knew. She stopped the second she saw me. Asked why I was up. I told her to tell me where she'd been. That changed her face immediately. Not guilt first. Annoyance. Defensive irritation. The expression of someone forced into a conversation she had hoped to schedule on her own terms. She set her purse down slowly and said she already told me work ran long. I asked if work usually ended with cocktails, a black SUV, and a hotel valet. That was it. The lie cracked. She went pale in a way that almost made me feel sorry for her for one ugly second, until I remembered I had been sitting in parking lots and reading half-confessions from her friend while she built excuses in real time. She asked what I thought I saw. I said no. Not this time. I told her exactly what I saw. The bar. The man. The kiss. The hotel. Each word landed separately. I wanted there to be no space left for editing. She sat down without being asked. For a second, neither of us said anything. Moose shifted under the table, confused by the tension, and laid back down with his head on his paws. It was such a normal little movement in the middle of something so ugly that it nearly broke me. Then Lauren started crying. Quietly at first. Controlled. The kind of crying people do when they still think there might be a version of the truth that leaves them dignity. She said she never meant for me to find out like this. I asked how she meant for me to find out. Through another rooftop trip? Another fake work night? Another friend with more conscience than loyalty? She flinched at that. Then I asked the only question that mattered. I asked who he was. His name was Derek. Not from Charleston. Not random. Not some drunken guy she met on a rooftop and never saw again. He was someone she had met through work months earlier at one of her events. Vendor side. In and out of the same hospitality circles. They started talking casually, then regularly, then privately. Charleston wasn't the start. It was just the first time she crossed a line in front of people who could no longer pretend not to see it. That hurt more than I expected. Not because I needed the story to be smaller. Because I had known, even while hoping otherwise, that it probably wasn't. I asked how long. She said 4 months. Emotional at first, then physical after Charleston. I just looked at her. And then, because there was no point in letting her keep the cleaner version, I said try again. She cried harder after that. Looked down at the table. Finally admitted it had been physical before Charleston too. Not often, she said, which was such a useless little mercy to offer that I almost laughed. Once before the trip. Then again there. Then tonight. That was the reveal. Not just the cheating itself. The scale of it. The planning. The layering of lies over ordinary life. The way she had come home from Charleston, folded clothes on our bed, kissed me on the cheek, laughed at Moose on her side of the mattress, all while already carrying a secret relationship into the house like a second suitcase I couldn't see. I asked if Nicole knew. She nodded. I asked if Bree knew. She said probably not everything, but enough to suspect. Then I asked about Tessa. That was the one that finally made Lauren look ashamed. Tessa had confronted her in Charleston after the rooftop night. Told her she was making a disaster out of her marriage and putting all of them in a disgusting position. Lauren had brushed it off, said nothing really happened, then later admitted enough to make Tessa sick. After that, Tessa pulled back. Not because she wanted drama. Because she couldn't stand smiling in my face while helping Lauren keep me in the dark. That part stayed with me. The friend who couldn't stay quiet turned out to be the only decent person left in the whole story. Lauren kept trying to explain after that. Said she'd felt restless for a long time. Said Derek made her feel noticed again. Said somewhere along the way she started compartmentalizing and then everything got out of control. That phrase landed like trash at my feet. Out of control. As if she hadn't been steering it the whole time. I asked her whether she loved him. She said she didn't know. And that was enough. Because I don't know is what people say when they want to preserve options, not marriages. I told her to pack a bag. She stared at me like she was waiting for the negotiation part. The part where I ask if we can still fix it, where I measure my pain against history and shared bills and a dog and years and routine. But there wasn't one. I had spent enough time chasing clarity. Once it finally arrived, it didn't leave any room for bargaining. She asked if we could talk in the morning. I told her we already were in the morning. We were just doing it at midnight because that was when her real life got back from the hotel. That one hit. She packed quietly. I stayed in the kitchen while drawers opened upstairs and a suitcase rolled across hardwood. Moose laid beside my chair the whole time. When Lauren came back down, she looked smaller somehow. Less curated. Less certain. She said she was sorry, and I believe she was sorry in the shallow way people are when consequence finally catches up to pleasure. It just didn't matter anymore. After she left, the house felt brutally still. In the weeks that followed, everything practical moved fast. Lawyer. Accounts. Living arrangements. Too many conversations that sounded polite on the surface and dead underneath. Nicole disappeared almost immediately, which told me everything I needed to know about her. Bree sent one awkward text asking if we were okay, and I ignored it. Tessa wrote me once more, said she was sorry for not speaking sooner. I told her the truth, late honesty still beat loyal silence. As for Lauren and Derek, whatever fantasy they had built in bars and hotel lobbies did what those fantasies usually do once real life gets involved. It shrank. I didn't need details. I heard enough through the same social circles to know it never turned into the grand love story she'd risked everything for. That part no longer belonged to me anyway. Looking back, the betrayal didn't start when Tessa texted me. It didn't even start in Charleston. It started the moment Lauren got comfortable living two versions of herself at once and trusted that everyone around her would stay quiet long enough for the lie to feel normal. That's how these things rot. Not always with one huge confession. Sometimes with one uneasy friend, one half-typed message, and a husband who finally realizes the truth has been trying to reach him through somebody else's conscience.